Hey everybody, this is Randy with Modern Randy. Today I'm going to be going over another Pioneer deck since we have the RC2 season coming up here in just about a week. Um, Talking about Waste Not, the mono black deck that's been running around, putting up numbers in challenges, putting up numbers in the prelims, kind of just overall getting played. I talk about the namesake of the deck here, Waste Not. It is a one black, one generic enchantment. Whenever an opponent discards a creature card, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Whenever an opponent discards a land card, you add double black. And then whenever an opponent discards a non-creature, non-land card, you draw a card. So basically, we're trying to get our opponents to discard cards while this is out. That way we can get more value and do things while they're sitting there with no cards in hand. So we'll start off with the most obvious card here, Thoughtseize. Everyone knows kind of what this card does. This is, if you're playing black, you're playing for Thoughtseize. You're almost priced into that at this point. In Pioneer or even in Modern, things like that, like you're playing black, you're playing Thoughtseize. This is probably one of the best one drop ever printed for black. We're also running two Duresses as well to be able to hit all of our opponents, non-creature, non-land cards. Being able just to get more value with that, with being able, when you have Waste Not out, you're drawing a card while they're discarding a card, so you're essentially 2-for-1ing at that point. You have Go Blanks, which target player discards 2 cards and exiles that player's graveyard. Perfect for against Phoenix, one of the biggest decks in the format. Being able to nuke their graveyard consistently in the main deck is going to be huge. Helps you with that effect. And then that's basically all our discard cards, or all of our discard outlets. For spells that we're playing, besides obviously Liliana the Veil, where each player will discard a card. She can also sacrifice creatures, and then her ultimate can kind of just like take over the game because you're gonna nuke half your opponent's permanents, and you're still gonna have everything you have. So you're gonna half their lands, half their creatures, half whatever. It's gonna end up working out better for you. Along with that, we're playing 2 Sheoldred's Edict, 2 Bitter Triumphs, and then 4 Fatal Pushes that are as like our main spot removal. Spot removal in quotation marks there. Sheoldred's Edict's not a spot removal card per se. We're also running 1 Extinction Event in the main, along with a Rankle's Prank. If you don't know what this card is, I don't blame you. It's basically it's played after Rankle the creature, but it's 4 mana sorcery, 2 black and 2 generic, and then you can choose one or more modes. You can have each player discard 2 cards, each player lose 4 life, or each player sacrifice 2 creatures. And obviously, you can do all 3 of those modes. You can do just 1 of those modes. You can do 2, whatever fits your bill. I mean, if you have Waste Not out, obviously you're probably going to want to have everybody being discard 2 cards. You can also get rid of 2, like their 2 creatures or 1 creature they have, whatever. That way, you can just kind of clear the board and keep getting value while you're doing it. And then one of the few ways we win here is through either Sheoldred. I don't really need to explain this card. You guys know what it is. You know how good this card is. And then also the Bat God here. So for anyone who doesn't know what this card does, I'll just quickly go over it since Magic doesn't want to help me out here. It's a 5 mana, 3 generic and 2 black for a legendary creature, Bat God. Flying, lifelink, and then when it attacks, each opponent discards a card. And for each opponent who can't, you draw a card. And then whenever an opponent discards a land card, you create a 1/1 bat creature token with flying. And then when it dies, you can return to the battlefield tapped as Temple of the Dead. So it adds a black, and then you can pay 3 and tap and transform. Form Temple only if a player has 1 or fewer cards in their hand. You can only do that as a sorcery. So essentially an undying creature, because they're gonna always have 1 or less cards in their hands most of the time, or you're gonna have 1 or less cards in your hand, because of all the discard we're running. And then we also have 2 Bangbusters as kind of like some just value creatures, or value card draw essentially, and a Cling to Dust to kind of just hit things from the graveyard, give us a little bit of extra draw, a little bit of extra graveyard hate in the main. So along with all this removal, value, and just discard outlets and annoyances that you're doing with your opponent, you also get to play a bunch of utility lands too. So we get to play the full forward Castle Lochwin. So this is part of the castle cycle. It taps to add black. Comes into play tap unless you control swamp, which shouldn't be a problem with our deck since we are mono black. And then it has 2 black and a generic. You can tap, draw a card, and then lose life equal to the number of cards in your hand. So obviously, if you're 1-for-1ing your opponent a bunch and things like that, and you're both low on resources, paying 3 mana at end of their turn to draw 1 card, lose 2 life, draw one card, lose one life, things like that. You're just gonna keep pulling ahead of your opponent while they are sitting there looking at, like, you know, their one or less cards in hand, going, man, I wish I could do something this game. We also get to play 4 Field of Ruin and 1 Demolition Field, which is basically just another Field of Ruin. But, you know, to hit out any of our opponent's value lands, either creature lands, things that we couldn't necessarily get a hold of for whatever reason because we couldn't get them to discard it fast enough, or they played it on turn 1, things like that. We also get to play Hive of the Eye Tyrant, which is just basically our creature land we're playing. It becomes a 3/3 creature with menace, and then when it attacks, you exile a card from defending player's graveyard. So a little bit of graveyard hate, not really. It's just a 3/3 menace that, you know, is hard to answer essentially in the late game. We also get to play Gaia Reach Sanatorium. So legendary land as a generic, or as a colorless, sorry, not a generic, as a colorless. And then you can tap, and each player discards a card, or draws a card and then discards a card. So it's great with Waste Not, you know, being able to force them to discard a card. Just keeping that cycle going, keep getting more and more value from them. And then obviously we're playing 10 swamps, an Urborg, and then 2 Sunken Citadels, basically just as more value, so that way we can, you know, tap 1 mana to activate our Field of Ruins or Demolition Fields or our Gaia Reach Sanatorium, or we need to use, you know, 3 lands instead of 4 for Hive, or 2 lands instead of 3 for Castle. Just good value all over. This deck really excels at this kind of like the mid-game plan, or like the mid-range decks where like you're just being able to constantly whittle them out of resources. You just kind of answer everything they're doing, and you're slowly just chipping them out of resources while your Waste Not is adding value to you, you're accumulating value, things like that. Kind of like solid deck right now. Also, Liliana the Veil looks really strong right now because we have that Vampires deck running around, so, you know, you figure if they go turn 2 creature, you go Fatal Push it, they go turn 3, bring out Vein Ripper, you get to go turn 3 Liliana, Edict your Vein Ripper, you're still at parity. Yeah, you lost 2 life, but you're not, you know, now dealing with a 6/5 with the ward, a sacrifice a creature, all that fun jazz. So like this deck kind of has popped up more in popularity, I think, because of what we're seeing the metagame become, essentially. So it's just good. It's good against Rakdos Vampires as a whole. Obviously, you can still lose to Rakdos Vampires because, you know, you do have a lot of air in this deck, which is like the biggest problem, right? Like you have Thoughtseize, Go Blink, Duresses. They're all kind of air in the like late game when you've done your thing, you've gotten your opponent to 0 cards, and now they're just playing every card that they're drawing. So you're no longer getting, like, you know, when you top deck a Thoughtseize on turn 5 and they have no cards in hand, and that card looks real bad. Looks real great on turn 1 though when you're able to destroy their hand. So it is a little give and take with this deck as a whole. Also think this deck is pretty well positioned against Phoenix with just the amount of graveyard hate essentially in the main deck. You know, you have 4 Go Blanks to nuke their graveyard. You have a Extinction Event as well to help, you know, if they bring back like 1, 2, 3 Phoenixes, being able just to, you know, choose even and just exile them is huge. You also have the Bat God, which is super hard for Phoenix to deal with just because it keeps coming back. Same thing with Shieldred, demands an answer. That deck draws 1,000,000 cards. I know, I play it. So, you know, Shieldred's kind of one of those other pains. And then you also Cling to Dust even as another, you know, way to hit the graveyard, hit the Phoenixes to make it to where they don't have as much value. Excuse me, going forward. Definitely like the aggro decks, ironically enough, are what like kind of trips up this deck. So, you'll see like the heroic deck can go underneath this type deck. The Izzet and Soul deck can go underneath this because yes, we do have some edict effects in this deck, but like, you know, if our opponent goes turn 2, make an indestructible 5/5, and we don't have Shieldred Edict immediately or Liliana the Veil and no other creatures on the board for us to edict it with, we're gonna not win that matchup, right? That's not something we want to see happen. So the aggro decks can definitely go underneath you, and that is a problem with this deck, which we'll address in the sideboard in a second. But realistically, like, this deck kind of shines against the 2 biggest decks that are in the format right now, so definitely a reason to play this deck, definitely a reason to pick it up and learn it. And I implore anybody who is, you know, preparing for RCQs, who is looking to try to qualify this season to go to DC. Yeah, to go to DC this season. Make sure you're playtesting. Make sure you know what to expect. Anybody who has access to Magic Online and has a any kind of card service, I use Mana Traders to rent cards and things like that. I implore you to play the deck that you're playing, obviously, to get more reps in, things like that. But also play the decks that you don't really know a lot about, that are popping up, that are popular. That way you can figure out what their weaknesses are, what you're gonna see going forward, and like how how your deck can attack it, right? So like, if you're playing Phoenix and you're not really sure how to beat this deck, I implore you to pick it up, play it a little bit. You can see you'll run into Phoenix on the leagues for sure. Or if you have any friends who you play test with and whatnot, proxy it up. Even just proxy it up, figure it out, play it. If you don't have the cards, that way you can at least see how this deck works, how the interaction works, figure out what your way is to beat this. But moving on to the sideboard here, which kind of helps shore up some of our matchups. So we have, two more Extinction Events and a Path of Peril in the sideboard for those low to the ground creature decks. For the things that we need to answer, basically. Path of Peril is great against all the low to the ground decks, destroys all creatures mana value 2 or less. Not really too hard to cap. Like, what you want to be able to destroy them. Things invented well against any like the bigger decks that go bigger, or things that we just need to answer right away. And then we have two Knight of Dust Shadow. Basically, this card is 100% here just for the Amalia matchup. I have to imagine the Amalia matchup is kind of rough with this deck. We don't kill particularly fast, so we're going to give them consistent time to set up. Yeah, we're going to be destroying their hand and stuff, but eventually, like, they can draw out of it. They can set up their combo. You want something else as an added bonus, so this is a 2/2 for 2. Menace, your opponents can't gain life. And then you can give it +1/+1 till end of turn for paying a black and a generic. Really, all this card says is your opponent can't gain life. That's all you care about with this, because you just stop the Amalia combo dead in its tracks if they can't gain life. Then we have our two Bankbusters and our Invoke Despair. Basically, both these cards are just there for any of the grindy matchups, things where the game's going to go long and you just want that extra value, extra whatever against them. Just really helps in that to eke out more value. Nibtolite's another big deck that is starting to come back out. That deck has a bunch of heavy hitters and things that, like, yeah, you got them to zero cards in hand. You're kind of both looking at each other. Maybe you're drawing an extra card or turn or something like that, and they're gonna rip a 5-drop, rip a 6-drop, things like that, and just pull ahead in the game because they have this card advantage engine that they just drew. So you're gonna want the Evoke Despairs there, the Reckoner Bankbusters. There's ways to slow them, ways to keep up with their card advantage, and something to do after you have random out of cards. Then we also have Graveyard Trespasser and Ashiok Dreamrender. Really just there for the graveyard hate, as well as, Trespasser is another good value creature as well. You can put this in kind of the value category along with the graveyard hate. So good against Phoenix, good against good against Phoenix, good against Nibdelite to some degree, because with the Ashiok to where they can't, search their library, not necessarily a huge thing, but just good for those certain things. Good, you could play Ashiok even in against the Lotus Field deck, so that way they can't search up their Lotus Field, things like that. Kind of annoying to remove as well for Lotus Field as itself. And then we have two more Duresses here, basically for those combo matchups, essentially Lotus Field, Contorius, things like that. Just things where you want, excuse me, what more turn 1 discard, things where you care about hitting, their non-creature spells. Things that you're not worried about them having creatures or things like that. You want, like, oh yeah, I want to hit this, I want to hit that, certain things like that. Overall, I think this deck is really well positioned in the meta. I think it's definitely something you can see come out and do well. I could easily see this taking down an RCQ without any kind of real issues. Biggest problem with this deck is that you do have a bunch of air in the deck, so that is like the biggest problem. Is the mid to late game is where this deck ironically probably struggles the most, where if you don't have something already going, like a Waste Not or something like that, or you don't find a Shieldred or a Reckoner to kind of draw a bunch of cards, or one of your Castle Lockwinds to like keep pulling you ahead, that is like the biggest problem with the deck. But I think this is a great deck to pick up. It's a great deck to learn about. It's definitely something you want to be prepared for, or have a semi game plan going into your RCQ that you're going into whether you're playing, Phoenix, Vampires, Izzet and Soul, whatever deck you're playing, those are just three of the big ones. Any deck you're playing, though, you want to kind of have a game plan about this, or at least recognize that this is on your radar. Obviously, if they go turn 1 Swamp Thoughtseizes, you can't immediately put them on a Waste Not deck. That could easily be Vampires, could easily be any other black deck that someone's playing in the format. But, just something to think about, like when you're trying to narrow down what you're playing against and what you need to be prepared for, how you need to craft your hand or your draws to beat this deck, or to beat the deck you're playing against. But just kind of wanted to spotlight one of these decks. I'm going to keep doing this probably for the course of the RCQ season, just kind of keep pointing out decks that are popping up or decks that are doing well. If you have any deck you kind of want me to see me go over, or something you're confused about, or anything like that, leave a comment. I'll gladly respond back to you. I'll gladly make a video if that's something you need. Just kind of trying to be out here prepping people for the RCQ season coming up. I know this is their second iteration of Pioneer, so I'm sure more people are going to be trying to play the RCQs. They're going to be trying to qualify for DC. They're going to, this might be your first time playing in a big event like this or anything like that. So we do a lot of stuff working around the RCQ season and prepping for it and what you need to be doing and what you should be doing as a whole. You don't need to do anything that I suggest, obviously. But this is the Waste Not Mono Black deck that is running around. Be prepared for it. Think about it. Maybe you want to play it. It's a fun deck. As always, I am Randy with Modern Randy. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. Help this little channel grow a little bit if you could. If not, hope you liked the video. I'll see you next time.